This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/Yarazaid. I'm going to try to not be facetious, because I know what people mean when they say an actor they like should do an A24 film, or what they mean when they say they like the mood of A24 films. I know what they mean. But at the same time, I always ask myself why they mean that. You'll find most often when a chronically online movie lover says something to the effect of A24 type film, they mean something in the vein of Ex Machina, Midsummer, or It Comes at Night. But A24 covers a lot of ground. Their ethos has always been to pick the most interesting projects, but they've never really limited their company to just one genre. Poignant dramas, offbeat comedies, romantic journeys, cerebral horror, all are welcome. Vastly different genres from vastly different voices, all of it culminating in a collective celebration of creativity unbound by convention. It's beautiful. In the early days, the company bought films like Ginger and Rosa, which they handled distribution for in the United States exclusively. Ginger and Rosa is a slow-moving drama about the close friendship between two teenagers and the many ways their bond is tested. From the mind of Sally Potter, writer and director of the widely acclaimed Orlando, Ginger and Rosa is a tender yet fraught account of familial strain, coming of age, and betrayal. It doesn't have a lot in common with what many seem to think is A24's signature style. Does A24 really have a signature style? Whoever wrote the Wikipedia entries for A24, for example, said the company most often produces and distributes movies that are, quote, artistic, psychologically disturbing, and mind-bending horror films often referred to as elevated horror.
It doesn't even make any sense!
Most of these films share a similar approach, including ambiguity, bleak atmosphere, disruptive formulas, outbursts of violence, psychological dilemmas, and realistic character drama. The thing about this entry, and about the general consensus that an A24 film can be categorized by any one thing, let alone that dreaded term elevated horror, is fascinating because, well, it's not completely true. A24's horror films are perhaps their most popular outputs, I'll give you that, with Ari Aster's work in particular being a driving force in lifting the company into the cultural zeitgeist. But the idea that the company specializes in these kinds of films is unequivocally untrue. When you break it all down, and I of course did because I'm a loser with not much else to do with my time, those so-called elevated horror films represent a very small fraction of the company's output. In the decade plus since A24's inception, they've distributed and produced over 100 movies. For the sake of this list, I counted movies that have been released and ones that have concrete release dates set for this year. Doing it this way, I counted a total of 166 films. And do you know how many of those films are horror and/or psychological thrillers? 25. The most common genre released under the company's name is drama, and not cerebral dramas or experimental dramas, just regular schmegular old dramas. Think Ginger and Rosa, The Whale, Priscilla, or The Iron Claw. With horror movies only representing about 15% of the company's overall output, how can horror really be their specialty? It's not that big of a mystery, not really. The horror movies A24 puts out tend to become events, and out of all the genres they have, horror is the one they market the most. Not just horror, but anything dark and psychologically twisted, I suppose. In fact, when my Saltburn video was still publicly available, I would often get comments like, I'm surprised Saltburn isn't an A24 film, and I never really knew what to make of it. Basically, A24, despite producing all sorts of genres, has itself become a genre, and that genre is almost always horror, despite the variety that the company offers. What I find is that there are a handful of directors whose films helped to categorize A24 in this way. The big ones are Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, Ty West, and Alex Garland. While Aster and Eggers saw both their feature-length debuts under the company, West and Garland had pretty much established themselves in the industry. Garland wrote 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Dread, and a bunch of other movies before making his directorial debut with Ex Machina, and recently seeing one of A24's biggest financial successes with Civil War. Ty West, prior to the release of X and Pearl in 2022, had already been in the industry for 17 years. I was first introduced to his work through VHS, a movie that was really great when I was 15. And he's been an exciting voice in horror since The House of the Devil. I can't help but notice that it's the artistic direction of these filmmakers that have come to characterize the company, and I could never really understand why that idea bothered me. When the trailer for the third installment of Ty West's horror series, Maxine, dropped online, there was feverish excitement in the air. Maxine is a companion piece to two movies that quickly became darlings of the chronically online film community, and it was already highly anticipated. I mean, Maxine Minx, played by Mia Goth, has pretty much already become a horror icon, and it's set in 1980s Los Angeles no less. Oh, the movie was bound to have a big audience. A common sentiment I heard and saw, whether it was online or even at film events in the city, was that people were excited for the film because they were big fans of A24. They trusted A24. They believed in A24. It would be untrue for me to say that Ty West's name never came up, but I'd also be lying if I said he was brought up as often as A24. The reason people were excited about Maxine was because they either loved X, loved Pearl, or loved both. And all three of these movies were written and directed by West, but the person getting the praise wasn't even a person, but a faceless company. And this sentiment is pretty common. I see A24, I click. I don't think it's that odd that people like the type of movies they see A24's name show up in, and I don't think it's odd that they've come to love the company so much. It's definitely new. You can't say with confidence that Miramax in the 1990s had the same following that A24 does now. Even Fox Searchlight, during the height of its twee era, which saw the releases of Napoleon Dynamite, Juno, and Little Miss Sunshine, never could have had this kind of allegiance behind them. It's funny because when you find lists of so-called twee movies, I guarantee you there will be at least 10 on the list that were distributed by Fox Searchlight. And even though twee is to Searchlight what elevated horror is to A24, they're not the same at all. This is really the first time in history that we're seeing a production/distribution company have a hardcore fandom rallying behind it. So it definitely feels strange because it is so new, but it's not a mystery. I know for some people, the films they see distributed by A24 were the first time they saw films with that atmosphere. Up to a certain point, maybe the only horror films they'd seen were slashers or the Warrens cinematic universe. So a movie like Hereditary was not just different, but it was reinventing a wheel. Sure, plenty of movies with that atmosphere have existed before. Cairo, The Hunger, Kuroneko, Eraserhead. But we all have to start somewhere. I know a lot of the hardcore A24 fans use the company as a way to find out more about other genres. Maybe they watch I Saw the TV Glow, which was really great by the way, I'm still thinking about it, and want to find other movies that make them feel that way. Maybe they look up interviews with Jane Schunbrunn and see what movies inspired them, and maybe along the way they find Donnie Darko, or Greg Araki's Teen Angst trilogy, or Videodrome, and suddenly they're on another fantastic cinematic journey. That is a treat. That is a gift. And that is a big part of the appeal for those dedicated A24 fans. And I get it. But for the fans who don't delve as deep, for the casual fans who won't bother getting to know the names of the people behind these films, it's a little sad. Because in Hollywood, whether your production is a big blockbuster or a small indie film, it is all too common for the individual creatives to get lost in the shuffle. I recall the first time I felt weird when I heard someone say they liked the look of A24 films. The first time I heard it, I was confused too, because by that point I had seen Spring Breakers, Under the Skin, Locke, and unfortunately, a glimpse inside the mind of Charles Swan III. No one needs to see that movie. Not even the biggest A24 fan needs to see that movie. So I knew films distributed by A24 didn't just have one look, and I knew they knew that, but we still fell into this way of talking about the look of this particular film, the work of a skilled cinematographer, as if accrediting its visual quality to A24, the company, and not any of the people who did the work to make it look that way. I know it's futile to point this out because it's not like you can change other people's behaviors. I guess I just wish the excitement people had for the A24 film was also an excitement about the director, especially if they made at least one before. With Rose Glasses, Love Lies Bleeding, a violent fever dream of love and lust, the excitement was more about A24 than it was about a follow-up to Saint Maud. Understandable, I suppose, given how underpromoted Saint Maud was, but in the case of Ty West, given his long track record, it's particularly frustrating that the buzz around his films right now have more to do with A24 than with him, even though he's been an exciting voice in the industry for so long. And obviously, this won't last forever. I was saying the same things to people almost a decade ago after The Lobster came out, and I would be like, oh, The Lobster isn't a strange film because it's distributed by A24. It's a strange film because Yorgo is a strange guy, and we love that for him. And now we've reached a point where people are excited about a Lanthimos film because it's him, because they loved The Favorite, and they loved Poor Things, and they loved The Lobster. And if they've really been in the trenches, they loved Dogtooth. We will reach a point where people are excited about a Rose Glass film and not an A24 film. I know that. And I respect A24 because it's marketed itself so well that people are more likely to give a movie by a brand new filmmaker a shot just because they recognize the logo. Do you know how amazing that is for filmmakers? To know that even if people aren't sure about you or the film you're making, you at least have eyes on you because people know the brand. It's a great opportunity, and I recognize all the good that it can do. Nothing is ever black and white though. One of the many things that set A24 apart from other distribution companies were the marketing strategies they utilized to promote their films. In 2015, the company promoted a film by creating a Tinder profile for a woman named Ava. The interaction between Ava and whoever matched with her would start off normally enough, but she felt a bit off. At some point in the conversation, she would direct you to an Instagram page where you could find out more about Ex Machina. A24 has always been really unique in how they promote their films, and they have had to get really creative since, unlike the major studios they were competing with, they didn't have a whole lot of money to market, especially in the beginning. Spring Breakers was a big success for the small company, not because of all the Harmony Korine fans were rushing to theaters, and not even because people were that invested in certain actors. It was because the company marketed through social media, creating a conversation in lieu of being able to take up billboard space in TV spots. A24 is still pretty creative with promoting, even though the way they initially began has completely transformed in this current social media climate. For movies like A Ghost Story, Uncut Gems, and Tusk, there were pop-up shops and collaborations. For example, did you know that there's a strain of weed inspired by Tusk? Events like that, merchandise like these, they don't just get people talking about the movie, but it gets people talking about A24. Solely through word of mouth and kitschy buzz, they carved out a space for themselves as a company full of oddities, one that was exciting, risk-taking, and captivating. Their creative marketing campaigns only become an issue when they simply don't know how to market a film. Marketing a movie that gets labeled weird, like The Lighthouse or Midsummer, isn't necessarily easy, but there are eccentricities from the film that you can latch onto and make some interesting merch out of. For example, hot dog finger gloves, a nod to Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a lot harder to come up with merch or promote straight up dramas, especially if they have a heavier subject matter. But then again, they do have Kevin Von Erich action figures for sale, so what do I know? In 2023, A24 oversaw the production and distribution of two amazing films, Savannah Leaf's Earth Mama and Rape and Jackson's All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt. These movies were highly acclaimed but weren't shown a lot of love from the company itself, getting lost in the weeds when it came time to promote. Earth Mama had a limited theatrical run where it grossed a little over $6,000. All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt fared a bit better, grossing over $50,000. But both of these movies were released rather quietly with very little promotion from the company. Even looking over A24's Instagram page, it's common for them to post frequently about upcoming releases. For Priscilla, for example, they would post pictures for showtimes, behind-the-scenes photos, videos, interviews, fun reels about recreating Priscilla Presley's iconic makeup, and then after the movie was out, more reminders for their followers to see it in theaters while they could. A frequent topic of discussion in film circles earlier this year was all about how A24 dropped the ball when it came to promoting and campaigning for the Iron Claw. Some even argue that they failed to promote Priscilla well. While they perhaps could have done better, at least Priscilla and the Iron Claw were on people's radars. This here is completely anecdotal, but every time I have mentioned Earth Mama to someone, the person I'm talking to rarely knows what I'm talking about. And these are people who are really into movies, but they simply weren't promoted well. My reason for bringing this up is just to remind people that at the end of the day, A24 is still a company whose focus is naturally profit, and that's fine. As cool as it is that they've been able to platform so many artists, I desperately want us to rephrase how we talk about movies distributed from them. A lot of criticism of the so-called cult of A24 is often dismissed with one simple statement: they make good movies. It's not that deep. But in the aftermath of the writer's strike of 2023, I think it's important that we look at how we talk about movies. At the end of the day, A24 provides the most vital thing you need for this level of filmmaking: money and promotion. But they don't write the scripts, they don't light the sets, they don't direct the narratives. In many ways, the way A24 is talked about, you would think they were responsible for crafting these stories from scratch. Like, did you know that there is a section on the Wikipedia page for A24 called Influence? I fully thought this section would be about how A24 has influenced marketing ideas, like when they made a Twitter account for the literal and figurative goat, Black Phillip, to promote The Witch. But no, this section is all about Martin Scorsese, Grandpa Marty, if you know him like I do, talking about how great he thinks Ari Aster is. 3 of Aster's films have been produced and distributed by A24. I don't know, maybe something is wrong with me here, but I don't think Scorsese's praise for Aster translates as praise for A24. Someone clearly does, though. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Hereditary, released by any other company, would still be Hereditary. Ari Aster's vision doesn't begin and end with A24, and in an industry where creativity is continually credited to faceless companies, let's bring the attention back to the people behind it. That's all. The first time I made this video, someone commented that me saying filmmakers should be getting equal attention to the quality films they make and not just the company producing it was an elitist take. Let me know if you agree. Please explain and cite your work. Thank you for watching. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. The last time I did a Mubi read, I shared that I was beginning to explore more surreal animation, watching the likes of Suzanne Pitt and Jan Svankmajer. I've still been on a bit of a surreal kick, but I've started to delve into a few live-action surrealist shorts as well. Outside of the legendary Maya Deren and her significant film Meshes of the Afternoon, I hadn't seen a lot of experimental shorts. So Mubi's spotlight on Peter Czerkowski has been an amazing reintroduction to the genre. Czerkowski's films are experimental not just in narrative, but in creation. He crafts these otherworldly films from found footage. His most popular short, Outer Space, is a reworking of the film The Entity, a supernatural horror that Czerkowski cleverly reworks into a celestial nightmare and sensory overload. It's fascinating to watch his films, particularly when you know what footage he's using and how he's able to transform it completely. His films are currently streaming on Mubi in the US. Titles like Outer Space, Dreamwork, and Instructions for a Light and Sound Machine are my current favorites. And if that doesn't appeal to you, no worries, because there is tons to choose from on Mubi. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Yarazaid, that is mubi.com/Yarazaid, for a whole month of great cinema for free.